പ്രിയമുള്ളവരെ, സമന്വയ കൾച്ചറൽ അസോസിയേഷൻ കാനഡ ഇന്ന് ഒരു പുതിയ സംരംഭത്തിന് തുടക്കം കുറിക്കുകയാണ്. നാട്ടകം എന്നുള്ളത് നമ്മുടെ നാടിന്റെ അകം എന്നർത്ഥം വരുന്ന നാട്ടകം, നാട്ടിലേക്കുള്ള ഒരു യാത്രയാണ്. നമ്മൾ വിദേശത്ത് ഇരിക്കുന്ന നമ്മുടെ കുട്ടികൾ നമ്മുടെ നാടിനെ കുറിച്ച് കൂടുതൽ അറിയുന്നതിനും നാടിന്റെ ജൈവ വൈവിധ്യങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ച്, നമ്മുടെ ആവാസ വ്യവസ്ഥ, എക്കോസിസ്റ്റം, ബയോഡൈവേഴ്സിറ്റി, നേച്ചർ, ഹിസ്റ്ററി, നമ്മുടെ മിത്തുകൾ, അങ്ങനെ ഒരുപാട് കാര്യങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ച് ഇവിടെ ഇരുന്നും അവരത് പഠിക്കണമെന്നും മനസ്സിലാക്കണമെന്നുമുള്ള ഒരു ആഗ്രഹത്തിന്റെ പൂർത്തീകരണമാണ് നാട്ടകം. എല്ലാ കൊച്ചു കൂട്ടുകാരെയും ഞങ്ങൾ നാട്ടകത്തിലേക്ക് സ്നേഹപൂർവ്വം സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുകയാണ്.
First of all, thanks to Samanwaya, thanks to Suraj, brother, for having me here. This is the first time I'm giving a talk at like 6 in the morning. So also kind of really, this is also new to me. And I'm happy to be here to talk about Kerala, our frogs and our biodiversity. So as I was informed, so this talk is basically going to look at, or is basically trying to give a brief introduction on amphibians or frogs of Kerala, like specifically looking at one or two species in order to highlight the biodiversity of this landscape. Before diving right into the topic, I'll also be discussing a little about what Western Ghats does, what kind of biodiversity we have, and those kind of stuff as well. So yeah, let me begin with. So first of all, we all know what biodiversity is. Simply, biodiversity means like diversity in life forms, or diversity in life, or diversity in animal forms. Like in short, if you look for a definition, it is defined as the various forms of life that is found around us in the earth is what we term as biodiversity. But if you look at it in a scientific perspective or an academician's perspective, it's further divided into three major groups as genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem or ecological diversity. So to describe genetic diversity, I guess like this simple picture on the right explains it all. So we all know that humans, like us, we are one single species, which we call as Homo sapiens. Homo is the genus name and sapiens is a species name. So we are one species, which is Homo sapiens. But then, like, even though we are one species, like a European, an Asian, an American, or an African, all look different. So that level of diversity, or that level of variety among that one particular species, which is us humans, is termed as genetic diversity. So that's the case with so many other life forms as well. So even though we are one single species, like us, or people who are from Kerala, is totally different from people who are in the Himalayas, right? So like we can clearly make out the differences based upon the geography or places where we live in. Second comes the species diversity. So we all know, like, if we look at birds, it's not just one species of bird, it's not just one single species of crow, or it's not one single species of myna. We know that like there are a lot of different species belonging to different groups of animals. I was just using birds as an example. For instance, like if you look at amphibians, or if you look at reptiles, like in the world we have around 12,000 species of reptiles, 12,000 different species of reptiles, not the total number of reptiles I meant. So that is species diversity. And the third one is ecosystem or ecological diversity, which is like one of the most important one, and which is the diversity which actually governs, or which actually causes, which is actually the reason for the large level of biological or the species and genetic diversity in and around us. Around us, like if you like you guys are in Canada right now, it's not just one type of forest, or it's not just one type of landscape. You know that it's diverse. And if you come to Kerala, or if you come to India, like it's not just one type of forest. We have Shola grassland ecosystem, we have mountains, we have beaches, we have wetlands, and we have deserts, we have evergreen forests, we have dry deciduous forests. So diversity in the ecosystem, or diversity in the ecology, is also considered as one type of diversity under the broad term biological diversity. So that I think I'm audible, and I think I'm not fast. So
No, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, kindly bear with me, because like as a teacher, like our hours are pretty short, and we need to finish everything like 45 minutes or 1 hour time. So I tend to be a little bit faster with my talks. So kindly stop me, or kindly just let me know in the chat box, or anywhere if I'm going pretty fast or something. Cool. So so if you estimate the total living organisms currently present around us, it's around 10.5 million. I think I'm hearing my voice back, so someone's mic is on. Okay, so so it's an estimated 10.5 million organisms living on Earth, and yeah, you can see on the pie chart is that like it's a mix, and in it, a vast majority is occupied by invertebrates. Kindly bear with the spelling. It is not invertebrates, it's invertebrates. A V is missed there. So the vertebrates, the animals with a backbone, forms a very small portion where fits the humans, which is again a very small percent of the largest life circle. And comes plantae, then comes fungi, then comes unicellular and multicellular, like smaller organisms. So if you look at it, like if you look at the total living organisms on the earth, a large percentage is occupied by invertebrates, which are animals which doesn't have a backbone, including like which includes a lot of insects, mosquitoes, odonate spiders, beetles, and whatnot. So it's a large group. Out of the 10.5 million, the animals that have a name. So you might be seeing in the newspapers or social medias or wherever it is, like in news, online news as well, like new frog discovered, or a new snake discovered, or a new plant discovered. It's not that like a new animal like suddenly comes out of the earth and like started living in there. No, they were there. It's just that like scientists, people who study them, or like botrycologists, like people who study the frogs, or people who study snakes, or people who study butterflies, they just figured out that this is different from what we know, and they like name it. They give a scientific name to it. So that's what I meant when I said like we have around 1.25 million named organisms. So out of the 10.5, like we only have named around, or we only know about 1.25 million organisms. Around 6.5 million species are found on land, and 2.2 million like are found on the oceans. So even though there is a slight confusion, there would be a slight confusion there. So we always study that like there is more life in the oceans than on the earth. But here we are talking about the number of species. It's not the like total number of animals in the like water and land. But it's different. Like what we are looking at here is if you look at the number of species, if you look at the number of animals that are in the land and that are in the oceans, it's around 6.5 million on the earth and 2.2 million in the oceans. Which is because of the diversity of the ecosystem. So if you look at the ocean, there's only like little level of diversity. There is little level of variety in the oceans compared to the land. Like in the land, we have like vast area, which also has multiple diverse ecosystems, like different types of forests, different types of habitat within the land. And that is causing this much diversity in the land compared to the oceans. So among the vertebrates and invertebrates, the first box shows animals which are included in the group called as vertebrates, the animals with a backbone. So there are 5 groups of vertebrates in the world. They are fishes, birds, reptiles, mammals, and amphibians. There are 5 groups. And out of it, among vertebrates, the highly represented groups are fishes, followed by birds, followed by reptiles, followed by amphibians, and last 5% is attributed to mammals, in which us humans are included. Then comes the major group, which is invertebrates, the animals that doesn't have a backbone. Among invertebrates, 75% is accounted to insects. So around us, if you look at the Earth, the vast majority of this life form is being contributed by the insects. You can also figure that out, like by considering the animals that are found around us. We might see a lot of birds, we might see a lot of reptiles, we might see a lot of other animals, but if you look at the numbers, or if you compare it with the numbers, insects are the most represented group, or insects are the animals that are found in greater numbers compared to other animal groups. Yeah, this is like a
always remember, fuel up before you.
Yeah, so this is like a data that we researchers or scientists used to share to students to get them interested to come to our field and all. So there is a
Excuse me, iPhone 3, please mute.
Yeah, thank you. So based on the current cost and requirements, like this is again some like 10-year-old statistics, but it's still valid. We need around 1,200 years of work and more than like 3 lakh taxonomists. Taxonomy is the science of classification. It's a science of categorization. Like a taxonomist is the one who studies animals, like categorize them or classify them and then give them a name. So there's a very senior person called as Carl Linnaeus, who brought in the science of classification. So there are a lot of science behind it. I'm not going to delve into it. So maybe you can note it down and Google it up. So it's a branch of science where we classify animals and we name animals. So that's called taxonomy. And yeah, an approximate cost of around 20,000 billion rupees or dollars, which is again like at least 10-15-year-old statistics. It would be way more the current estimates. So coming to India, or coming to the like our land, coming to Kerala, so what's so special about it? We all know about hotspots. We all know about, we all have heard about biodiversity hotspots, places which has got a greater variety, places which has got greater number of endemic and endangered species. What do you mean by endemism? So an animal is called endemic when it is found only in that part of the world. So for instance, there's an animal called lion-tailed macaque, called Simho, like a macaque which looks like a lion because of the mane it has and the similar tail. So these lion-tailed macaques, they are Western Ghat endemic. They are found nowhere else in the world. They are found only in the Western Ghats. So if you look at the endemics and if you look at the variety of life forms that Western Ghats have, it's considered as one of the hottest hotspots of biodiversity in the world. And what's so special about it? So as you can see in the map, it's a long
class. Malayalam, Kerala to Baram class. Come on, you can do it.
Please mute Sumaya, please.
Yeah. Was that message to me or like?
Sorry, that's from outside. You can continue.
Okay,
yeah.
fine. I hope there are no more messages in the chat box. I'm somehow I'm not able to see the chat box. If there is anything that's for me in the chat box, Suraj bhai, please.
Yeah, I will inform. No worries.
Yeah. So as you can see, so like in this map, you can see like southern India and Sri Lanka. We have the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, and there is this red patch given in that map. So that red patch is the long mountain chain, which is like a wall. It is like, we can also compare it with the Great Wall of China. It acts like a wall, and it's a long 1,100 long mountain chain starting from Kanyakumari, and it goes up to Gujarat, covering all 7 states. So this mountain chain is reason for the all the climatic factors, all the climatic boon, all the climatic good things that we have as South Indians or as Keralites is because of this mountain chain. So this mountain chain is actually older than Himalayas, and this long, great wall is standing there and giving us all these range and diverse habitats as well as diverse life forms. So, like, I mean, I don't know whether this will stand right now, because if you look at the temperatures that's in Kerala at the moment, it's more or less same in almost all 14 districts, except maybe Wayanad or Idiki, which has some higher elevation areas. Otherwise, most of the places are having very hot temperatures at this point of time. So, like yesterday or a day before, I was just like, so it went about 39 to 40 degrees somewhere in Calicut, Thrissur, and other places. But when, like, at least 10 years back, maybe the seniors and like people who are a bit old, other than the students who are here, they'll be knowing, like, at least 10 years back or 15 years back, when we talk about the temperatures, when we talk about heat that's happening in Kerala, the first thing that will come to our mind is Palakkad. But now almost every other district is in par with Palakkad, is what I would say, because it is as hot as Palakkad. It's not just Palakkad, but also Calicut, Thrissur, Ernakulam, Kasaragod, Kannur. All these places are having very high temperatures. Like it's going up to 40, 41 degrees or 39 degrees in the summer. Sometimes even before the summer, starting from February or January and all. And like many of our reservoirs, many of our like forest areas with lakes, rivers, and all are getting slowly drying now. So the point I want to make here is that, like, 10-15 years back, when we talk about increasing temperature or like increased temperatures, like the first thing that will come to our mind is Palakkad district. Why is it so? Why was it so that Palakkad was having a higher or greater temperatures, or why is it having like a hotter conditions compared to other places? And that's attributed to one of the geographical reasons. So this long mountain chain has one major gap called as Palghat Gap. It's a 30-kilometer gap in this mountain. So if you look at this red great wall right there, there is a small gap in that red area, which is not depicted in the map, but there is a 30-kilometer gap where the mountains are not meeting each other. Otherwise, it is a long continuous mountain chain starting from Trivandrum to Nelliyapattis, and from the Nilgiris, or let's say Silent Valley areas, to up to Gujarat. So there is a gap. So because of the gap, all these rain clouds and all gets blown away by the wind, and the Palghat area receives a hotter or like more higher temperatures compared to other parts of the state. And Western Ghats, yes, it's an old long mountain chain with a wide variety of habitats. So this is like a shola grassland ecosystem with Neela Kurni flowers. It's called Strobilanthes kunthiana, which is also called as lutetial flower, which flowers or which blooms once in 12 years. So this was shot in 2018 from a place called as Ervikulam National Park, one of its kind habitat, which is found like only in that part of anomalies. And this is some pictures of the Western Ghats. Yeah, this is a Shola grassland habitats, evergreen forest. Like we normally don't call them rainforest, but yeah, it's also known as rainforest. These forests are evergreen throughout. It doesn't have other type of vegetations. It has trees, shrubs, and other plant compositions which are found in evergreen areas, which is like moist and humid and all throughout the year. Like similar evergreen forest patches. Then we have a lot of moist deciduous forests. We have a lot of dry deciduous forests. I just wanted to like show you or like depict some diverse habitats that are found in the Western Ghats or Western Ghat Mountains. It's actually Chembara Peak from Wayanad. This is a moist deciduous forest habitat from Wayanad. Cloud forest or high elevation Shola grassland ecosystems in Annamalais or Munnar.
Sandeep, if you can give a brief idea about or a short idea about what is semi-deciduous and deciduous and rainforest and grasslands, like all the four types, if you could little bit elaborate, it will be great.
Yeah, so basically, if you look at the classification of forest, there are around 44 different types of forest, according to Champion and Said. But like, it's very, very like scientific. Like we have to split it based upon species composition and all those stuff. But broadly, when we look at it, we used to say evergreen forest, moist deciduous forest, dry deciduous forest, and thorny scrub jungle. These are like four major kinds of habitats that we have in Western Ghats, or that we have in at least in Kerala part of Western Ghats. So evergreen forest, like I said, like it's evergreen, it receives a greater amount of rainfall compared to other parts. It stays evergreen throughout the year. There will be like thick leaf litter on the ground. The area will be wet compared to other forest types. Then comes semi-evergreen, which is not completely evergreen, but there will be evergreen plants as well as there will be some plants which are not like fully evergreen. The thickness of the litter will be less, and there would be like deciduous trees also in that habitat. Then comes moist deciduous forest. Moist deciduous, from the name itself, like like they shed their leaves once in, and it like it is again categorical. I mean, it is not as wet as evergreen forest, but wait one sec.
നമ്മുടെ ഈ പെരിയാർ ടൈഗർ റിസർവ് ഈ ശബരിമലയിലേക്ക് കണ്ടുവരുന്ന അത് ഏത് കാറ്റഗറി വരുന്ന ഫോറസ്റ്റ് ആണ്?
Sabarimala is specifically evergreen patches, but when you start from Pamba, there are patches which are semi-evergreen, and when you further goes down, there are areas which is moist deciduous. But when you reach Sabarimala, it is an evergreen patch. So you know how it is. Like there will be leeches. The area will be wet. It's mostly moist. Even when you go in the summer, there will be like wetness around the place. It will be misty, like that.
അങ്ങനെയുള്ള സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലാണ് ഈ നമ്മൾ ഈ ടൈഗർ ഒക്കെ കൂടുതലായിട്ട് കാണുന്നത്.
Not really. I mean, like so if you look at Western Ghats, most of the time the numbers of tigers are high in areas mostly in open forest, places like Wayanad or Parambikulam and all, because it's not too much of undulating topography. It also attributes the detectability. Again, if there is a tiger in Periyar Tiger Reserve, the chances of you seeing it is way lesser than seeing a tiger in the Wayanad landscape or Parambikulam landscape. So it's about detectability as well. But if you look at the numbers as well, if you look at the National Tiger Conservation Authority, NTCA report and all, the numbers of tigers are higher in areas like Wayanad, like where open forests are found, or in central Indian forest, Sal forest, which is like open Indian forest, open type of forest without an undulating topography. So when the topography is undulating, like you know how difficult it is. So those landscape has more tigers compared to Periyar landscape. So Periyar Tiger Reserve is actually the largest protected area, the largest like tiger reserve in South India or in Kerala. But then the number of tigers in Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary, which is at least 1/3 of Periyar, is way more than the number of tigers in Periyar Tiger Reserve. So it's all the habitat type, the prey availability, and all those things. So not necessarily the evergreen or semi-evergreen forest. It is difficult to see a tiger in an evergreen patch in a forest like Periyar. But then again, it's matter of luck and it's matter of experience and all those things combined. So I have been to Periyar several times, but then like my first or my maiden trip to Periyar, I saw a tiger hunting down like wild dogs. That was my first trip to tiger, where I never even dreamt of seeing a tiger, and I saw one. But then I have done like tons of trips to Periyar Tiger Reserve just to see a tiger, and I haven't seen a tiger. So it's all a matter of luck. And I mean, sometimes like you go, you track a tiger, you walk or you search for it, and you can find it. But most of the time in forests like Periyar Tiger Reserve or Shabarimala or like thick evergreen forest patches, it's not very easy to see them. So yeah, that's evergreen, semi-evergreen, moist deciduous. Then comes dry deciduous forest or thorny scrub jungle type of forest. So if you look at a forest like that in Kerala, I would say Chinnar Wildlife Sanctuary or areas in Attapadi. So these kind of areas are actually dry deciduous forests. It's like thorny scrub jungle, and it's dry mostly throughout the year. So they receive very less rainfall compared to other forest types. So that's in general a brief classification of forest types that are found here.
നമ്മുടെ ഫോറസ്റ്റിൽ മാത്രം കണ്ടുവരുന്ന അങ്ങനെ എന്തെങ്കിലും ഇതുണ്ടോ? അതായത് കുറച്ച് റെയർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള
ജിത്തു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ആഫ്റ്റർ ദ സെഷൻ നമ്മൾ ഒരു സെഷൻ വെക്കാം, കാരണം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ ഫ്ലോ നഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു പോകും. ലെറ്റ് ഹിം കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ദ സെഷൻ. ആഫ്റ്റർ ദാറ്റ് വി വിൽ ആസ്ക് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ്. ഓക്കെ, ബിക്കോസ് ഇറ്റ്സ് ടു ഓൾ. നമ്മുടെ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ഇടയിൽ കയറി വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഹി വിൽ ലൂസ് ദാറ്റ് ഫ്ലോ. അപ്പോ അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് നമുക്ക് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ചോദിക്കാം. ഓക്കെ, ദർ വിൽ ബി എ സെഷൻ. താങ്ക് യു ഫോർ
Sure.
അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡിങ്.
So maybe you can just like type down the questions in the chat box itself, so I can just go back and answer them one by one. Sure. So yeah, this is another image. I don't know whether it's clear or evident to everyone. And so this was a mountain range. This is an evergreen patch, and in just 2 years, that mountain has been carved up. You can see a small proclaim or an excavator working there on the right side of the image. Right. Like moving into our topic, amphibians or frogs. So like Sushma had mentioned, like this is biodiversity is a vast topic. Wherever you touch, you can talk about it. So since amphibians is one of my thrust areas and one of my favorite areas, like we thought like we'll start with the amphibian, and that's why we reached into this topic. So for everyone, like not just kids, or for everyone, like when we hear the question, like, or when we hear this thing, like what are amphibians or what are frogs, the first thing that will come to our mind is that like amphibians are or animals that can live both in land and water. It literally means it's from two words, amphi and bios, which means dual mode of life. Right. So they have a dual mode of life. Like they can live in land as well as they can live in water. And if you go by that particular definition, all these animals should be an amphibian, right? A turtle, they can live in land and water. A frog can live in land and water. Penguin, it lives in land and goes in the ocean for feeding and all. And again, it comes back. Hippopotamus, it is most of the time it's in the water itself. Crocodile, it is also another animal that's in the water. So if you go by that definition, right, animals that can live both in land and water, all these animals qualify to be an amphibian. But that's not the case. We all know that like a turtle is a reptile. it's not an amphibian. We know that hippopotamus is a mammal, like to which group is humans belong to. We know that penguin is a bird. We know crocodile is a reptile. So what's the difference between that, or like how do we go about? So we only say that like amphibians are animals that can live both in land and water. But then again, like animals that are doing it are not amphibians as well. Another example might be a platypus. It can live both in land and water, but it's considered as a mammal. It's not considered as an amphibian. Why is that? So scientifically, it is not a right definition saying which can live animals that can live both in land and water are amphibians. It is not right scientifically. But then, like, to define an amphibian, like scientifically or in a bit more defined manner, this is one of the major characteristics. All these images are photographs of amphibian eggs. Or I'll be more specific. All these are images of frogs, images of eggs of frogs. So what's the difference that you can see or where you can make out from this image? So all these eggs, they don't have a hard protective covering. They don't have an eggshell like a bird or like a reptile, or they are not in their mother's womb like a mammal. So amphibians, they don't have an eggshell. So their eggs are laid in, like sometimes laid in thousands of numbers, sometimes laid in like hundreds. Sometimes they are laid in strings. Sometimes they are laid in tree holes. Sometimes they are laid in water bodies, in rivers or stagnant areas, or in small ephemeral pools. Or sometimes they are also like found stuck or pasted onto like walls or rocks or onto leaves. And they're always seen in water or in the vicinity of water or in wet or moist, humid conditions. And why is that? Because they don't have a protective eggshell. They don't have a hard protective covering. And that's why they rely on this wetness, or that's why they rely on the tree holes or water bodies to complete their life cycle. So that's one major character to define an amphibian. So they don't have an eggshell is one major character. Then amphibian skin, it is permeable. So amphibians can breathe through their lungs like us, and they can also breathe using their skin. Their skin is very, very, very permeable, and they can breathe through their skin as well. So that's another character which makes an amphibian an amphibian. Unlike reptiles, like the snake on the right side, they don't have scales. Their body is not covered with scales. They have permeable skin. But when you look at reptiles, like be it a snake or be it a gecko, be it a turtle, be it a crocodile, all of them, their body is covered with scales or scutes. So it's completely covered with like hard protective skin layer of scales. And all. So then if you look at amphibians, their skin is permeable. And another major important character which makes an amphibians is that like they are dependent on water for breeding. So we know that amphibians. Yeah. Yeah. So we know that like amphibians, they lay eggs. They after mating or after breeding, they lay eggs in water or like any other wet medium that we just discussed. And these eggs will hatch out into tiny tadpoles. And these tadpoles live in water for some time, after which they metamorphosize into miniature adults. So they lay eggs, eggs hatch out into tadpoles. Tadpoles live in water for some time. And while in water, they will be feeding all the time, saving up all the energy. And then slowly they'll grow their limbs and their tail get resorbed and they metamorphosize into a miniature adult, and the cycle continues. So all these are the characteristics which makes an amphibian an amphibian. And it's not just the capacity to live in both in land and water that makes an amphibian an amphibian. Primarily, they don't have an eggshell. then their skin is permeable, they're dependent on water for breeding, and they're cold-blooded. It's not just amphibians that are cold-blooded, it's reptiles are also cold-blooded. So what do you mean by that? Like, we always use the term cold-blooded murder like that. So despite what's the temperature outside, or what's the temperature of the heater or the AC or air conditioning that we are using, our body temperature, humans' body temperature, is maintained somewhere around 32 or 33 degrees Celsius. It doesn't change according to the atmospheric temperature. We have the capacity to maintain our body temperature. But whereas cold-blooded animals, including amphibians and reptiles, they don't have, and fishes, of course, they don't have the capacity to maintain that temperature range according to the atmospheric conditions. They can't like maintain their body temperatures at one particular range according to what's happening outside. So after a heavy rain, and when the sunlight comes, you go out and look on a wall or a sandbank or on a river, you can see a snake or a gecko or a skink or a turtle basking in the sun. They're meeting their temperature requirements that way. Or they're just meeting those temperature requirements for their bodily activities from the sun. So that's why they are called as cold-blooded animals. So when we look at evolution, like when we look at amphibian evolution, like studies shows that, like, so this is called a geological time scale. This geological time scale actually depicts events that had happened along a longer time scale. So the first forms of life evolved somewhere around 4,500 million years ago. Then we know, like, there are certain periods, like there are eons, era, period, epoch, and events. Like, different events happened in different periods. All this might be confusing, but one thing among this slide is very familiar to everyone: Jurassic period. Thanks to Jurassic Park. But then we all know that, like, the dinosaurs were here. Then a long process, like a calamity happened, a meteorite collision, and they went extinct and all. So we know about Jurassic period. Like the Jurassic period, there are different periods where certain events in the evolutionary process happened. And if you look at amphibian evolution, it is supposed to be, or it is thought to have happened somewhere in the upper Devonian period, like around 400 to 400 million years ago, between 400 million years ago to around 360 or 380 million years ago. So it is during that period first amphibians occurred. So then comes the next question, like, from which group of animals did amphibians evolve? Again, it's supposed to be a group of fishes belonging to the group fishes, like among the vertebrates. So there's a group of fishes called as lobe-finned fishes or lungfishes. You might have heard or seen about this fish in National Geographic or Animal Planet or BBC and all. You would have seen fishes stuck in mud, like they look like they're dead, and suddenly rain comes in and they comes back to the life. So those kind of fishes, they are called lobe-finned fishes or lungfishes. This is a very famous fish which is also called as a living fossil. It's called coelacanth. So, like you can see in that image, they have fins which looks like lobes. So they have multi-jointed like fins. So during the upper Devonian period, during that period which we just spoke about, the earth was like less in oxygen. So fishes from the sea slowly crawled out from marine environments to freshwater swamps. So they went to freshwater swamps and they were living in the freshwater swamps. And in the freshwater swamps, there was less in oxygen, and slowly when the number arose, they started to have a competition for space, for oxygen, and all those things. And one group of fishes with their bony limb-like fins, they slowly crawled out. So these fins, these bony limb-like fins, they slowly evolved into limbs, and they crawled out of water, and they are the first or early amphibians. These are some of the early amphibians from fossil records. Yeah, this is called Acanthostiga. So that's the first group of amphibians that came out. So that's how amphibians evolved. So you can see on the right hand side, there's an amphibian which evolved from a fish, where their bony limb-like fins slowly evolved into limbs, and the tail is also there, and they crawled out of water. Even when they crawled out of water, because they don't have an eggshell, they have to be, or they have to stay in the vicinity of water. They have to stay in the proximity of water. They have to come back to water to lay their eggs. And they were restricted to that, those kind of habitats. It was at that point, another group, they went another step ahead and they evolved an eggshell. They are the reptiles. So compared to the amphibians, these reptiles, they had an advantage. They don't have to stay put with water. They don't have to stay in the vicinity of water, so they can move around. And I think someone is like marking in the screen accidentally. So they can actually move around, and then reptiles slowly flourished. They diversified in larger number, and they reached like every nook and corner of the earth at that point of time. And then comes the Jurassic period, and then reptiles grew in large proportions and all. So that's about amphibian evolution. Suresh bhai, I think like you can actually erase that mark. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah.
Perfect. So what happened is, like, when reptiles crawled out of water and they started moving around and they started diversifying in larger numbers, and they also started to grow in larger proportions. We know how huge or how big were the dinosaurs were. So then again, competition arose, and amphibians, they shrunk in size, and they started adapting to like micro habitats or microclimatic conditions. So if you go to a tropical forest, or if you go to a Western Ghats, if you go to a forest in Kerala, so one evergreen forest would have tons of micro habitats. So the microclimate or the temperature on the tree canopy might not be the same as the temperature on the mid-story, or it might be even lesser when it comes to the like terrestrial or the leaf litter. And if you go underground also, again, the temperature drops. So a small tree itself is a big micro habitat for an amphibian, for an amphibian which is very small. So the microclimatic conditions vary within a tree itself. So that helped amphibians, and they slowly evolved according to these tiny micro habitats. So if you go to a forest and if you look at a tree, and that single tree might be hosting an array of animals and sometimes an array of amphibians itself. There will be amphibians under the root, or there will be amphibians behind the bark, or there will be amphibians in the tree hole, and there will be amphibians living in the plants or parasitic plants that are on the tree. Sorry. So present day amphibians, they are classified into three major groups. Class amphibians, like scientifically classified as three major orders. The order Anura. Ura means tail. Anura means without a tail. So Anura includes frogs and toads, the forms, the leaping forms, the most common group of amphibians. So we all know about amphibians. So the first thing that will come to our mind are frogs and toads. Then comes order Chordata, which includes the salamanders and newts. They are lizard-like amphibians. They look like lizards, but they are amphibians. They don't have an eggshell, and they have all those characteristics that we discussed like in the initial slides. And the third group is Gymnophiona. Ophios, which means snake, and snake-like limbless, legless amphibians. They look like a snake. They also look like earthworms, but if you look carefully, you can see an eye, you can see a mouth, and there are like rings in their body. But whereas in an earthworm, if you like go and try to pick an earthworm, it will be just like a thread. They don't have a backbone. But if you go and try and pick an amphibian or like a Sicilian, they literally feel and look like a snake. They have a backbone, and you'll know how hard it is, like if you're going to hold one. So frogs and toads, they are the order Anura. They are animals. They are leaping forms. They are without a tail. Their fertilization is external. Like adults don't have tails, and yeah, we all discussed about it. Like they have a tadpole stage, and the tadpoles have gills. The tadpoles live in water, and they metamorphosize into adult. They have a tympanum. Most of the time, their hind limbs are adapted for leaping and swimming. In all these images, like on the bottom right image, you can see their hind limbs have skin between their hind limbs, which helps them in swimming. And sometimes it also helps them in like leaping or gliding from heights. And it works like a parachute when it's gliding from heights. So you would have heard about flying frogs or gliding frogs. It's not like they can fly like a bird, but they can jump from heights and glide for a longer distance using those skin folds as a parachute. Then comes salamanders. The salamanders are newts. In India, we have around 4 species of salamanders. They're restricted to the Himalayan region. They're not found in the Western Ghats. Salamanders are more found in the temperate regions. So the image on the right is a Mexican axolotl. It's a widely used animal in the pet trade. So this is a completely aquatic salamander, and in them they have a specialty that their gills they retain it throughout their life. They are completely aquatic and they don't move out of water, and so they retain their gills, and even adults will have that gills. Yes, this is the largest amphibian in the world. Chinese giant salamanders and Japanese giant salamanders. So they grow up to this size. You can understand from the image on the left, there is a dog, and there's a person, and there's this salamander. And on the right, you can see person is actually carrying a giant salamander. So, like I said, they're like found in parts of China, and it is one of the most threatened amphibians in the world, which includes a lot of threats, like they are being eaten up, they are being farmed for meat, and they were like widely hunted in their original landscape for a long time, but now like there are mitigation measures, but still the animal is considered to be under severe threat of extinction. So on the left is one species that is considered to be the smallest in the world, but it keeps on changing. There had been new discoveries. There is a new paper which came up like 1 or 2 months back, where they looked at another species of frog which is smaller than this. So you can imagine the size, like it sits on a nail. And on the right is a species which is found in Kerala, which is the smallest species of frog in India. Which is called as Nyctibatrachus minimus, and the common name is miniature night frog. This was discovered from Kurchiyarmala in Wayanad. It's found in like a large landscape in and around Wayanad. So that's a 5 rupee coin where the frog is sitting on, like, and the size is like fairly around 11 to 12 millimeters. And this is the largest frog in India. Indian bullfrog it is called. Maybe like the senior people here would be familiar with this one, because it was widely used as meat for a long time until it was banned somewhere in 1972 after the Wildlife Protection Act. Even now it is happening. Like even now, every year there had been several confiscations or several cases had been booked where people go out and hunt these frogs. So this is a protected frog. This frog is also in the Wildlife Protection Act, and it also gets some level of protection, just like several other wild animals of like tiger, elephant, and all. So this is the largest species that is found here in India. So just another close-up of the Sicilian, a snake-like Sicilian. You can see, like I said, like there is we can clearly see the eye, we can clearly see their mouth. So, and these animals, like they're they grow up to like 30 centimeters, sometimes like 15 centimeters, and their maximum width would be like would be not much than of our thumb. So, and yeah, they look very similar to earthworms, but unlike earthworms, we can clearly make out the eye, the head, mouth, and all. So they're called Sicilians, and some places in our language we used to call them kurdi. But the problem is, like, we also use the name kurdi for like for snakes as well. So this is not a snake, but an amphibian, and it's not venomous at all. But there are venomous Sicilians in the Central South American regions. Yeah, this is an interesting species. It's called Lithopedus sylvaticus, Alaskan wood frog, or sometimes also called as ghost frogs. Should note it down and maybe Google it up after this talk. So this frog, when extreme colder temperature comes, they just like freeze themselves and they arrest their metabolism and they stop their bodily activities and they just kind of sleep or stay inactive. And when the ice gets thawed, or when the favorable temperature conditions comes back, they slowly comes back to life. So it's another like very interesting species that's found in the Central North American parts. So all these three maps shows distribution of all these three groups. So frogs and toads, they're found fairly around the globe, except for the polar regions. Whereas salamanders, they are found mostly in the temperate regions and some parts of central North American forest. And last group, the Sicilians, you can see they are found in the equatorial region, mostly in the equatorial regions, and like in central South American regions, Central African regions. And in Indian region, you can see the Western Ghats, like that green area is where the Sicilians are found, and some parts of Himalayas and Southeast Asia. So if you look at amphibians numbers, there are around 8,000. So this number has gone up. It's around 8,600, or it's more than 8,600 in the world. And among them, the largest group is frogs and toads. Like more than 90% of them belongs to the group called frogs and toads. And Europe, we are around 7,000, more than 7,500 species. Followed by salamanders, which is around 800 species, and the least represented groups is Sicilians, which is around 200 to 250 as per the current numbers. And if you look at India, we have around 450 species of amphibians. If you look at Western Ghats, we have around 250 species, or around 300 species of frogs. And in Kerala, we have 200 species. And out of the 200 species that are found in Kerala, more than 90% are endemic to Western Ghats, which are found nowhere else in the world. And that's why Western Ghats is so important in terms of biodiversity. This is just the case of amphibians, and it's more or less similar, or like the level of endemism is higher in other groups as well, but not as high as amphibians. But yeah, Western Ghats have high level endemism in terms of biodiversity, in terms of several groups of animals. So this map again shows the global amphibian species richness and areas which has maximum amphibian diversity, and the areas with yellow and red are the areas which has maximum number of amphibians in a present landscape. And if you look at it, like Central America, Central African regions, and South African regions, and South Indian region, Himalayan, Western Ghats region, you can see like there's a tiny red dots in the Western Ghats region. And all these areas, and in that also, in that Western Ghats region also, Kerala holds the greatest diversity than other states, all other states combined in terms of amphibian diversity. All said and done, there are several amphibians that have gone extinct. So we know of around 113 species that are extinct. But scientists also estimate that like there are several amphibians that went extinct even before they were discovered. So the top left image, you can see a frog in someone's hand and a paperclip like opening its mouth, and you can see another frog inside the mouth. So the species is called gastric brooding frog. It's called Rheobatrachus silus. Unfortunately, the species went extinct. What you're seeing there is after the breeding or after the mating process, the adult swallows the egg, and the development happens inside the stomach of the parent or inside the stomach of the adult. So imagine eating something. So if you eat something, what will happen? It will get digested. So here the eggs are not getting digested. So in the egg of that species, it has a component called as prostaglandins. It has a component called as IG3. So once they are inside the mouth or inside the stomach of the adult, the IG3 inhibits the production of gastric juices. It inhibits the production of digestive juices. It stops digestion. So the parent is left with no option to have food until the eggs are hatched out. So the whole development happens inside their stomach, and the young ones come out of their mouth. How wonderful it is! Like imagine the level of parental care that this tiny species are doing. Similarly, the one on the left is another species which went extinct. It's called golden torch. You can Google it up. There's a lot of stuff available on this species. Threats faced by amphibians. Yes, there are a lot of threats like pollution, diseases, linear intrusions, roadkills. So amphibians, unlike larger animals or unlike many other animals, they don't have the capacity to breed throughout the year. They have a very small window. They can only breed during the monsoons or whenever there is a rain, whenever the conditions are perfect. And during rains, they just move around habitats a lot. And that's when roads acts as death traps for them. So they will be living happily and they'll be coming out to breed once in a year, and they'll get smashed on the road. Pollution, diseases, global warming. So many species, they lay eggs in temporary pools. Imagine rain comes and there forms a temporary pool and a frog breeds in it. And in 2 days, rain stops, very hot or sunny climate comes, and the temporary pool dries up. All the tadpoles will die. So climate change is one thing that is affecting the amphibians a lot. So it's also on the rise, and like climate has been shifting. We all had been discussing about all these things like all these years, but then like older people will be knowing, like as a kid we used to be saying that like climate change or climate change happening, climate change coming, but then like now it's evident in front of us. Last 10 or 15 years, we know what all changed. Our rains changed, the patterns of rains changed, the monsoons changed. Kerala also saw one of the greatest flood in the last 100 years or so. And a lot of other natural things like of course, the COVID virus, then the Nipah virus, lot of things coming up in the recent years. Most of them are also connected to climate change. And like recently the EP and IPBC and all have recently changed calling climate change as human-induced climate change. Climate change had been happening and it's a reality, but what is happening right now is that like because of our interventions or because of anthropogenic activities, the rate of climate change has gone higher than how it was earlier. This is another image that went viral in the social media like a couple of years back. You can see the eyes are located inside the frog. That's another interesting story. So this is mostly happening because of a parasite called Rubberia on Tatray. And how it works is, so this parasite will get into the tadpole, and the tadpole mostly affect the regions of their limbs. And on the right, you can see that image. And what will happen if it is having a multiple limbs? It's actually a disadvantage for the species. So they can't move much, and they will be preyed upon by birds. And birds are the definitive host of these parasites. And once the frog is eaten up by the bird, the parasite will move on to the birds. So that's how the parasite complete their life cycle. And it's very interesting that they link with amphibians. There's another story. This is a species called Hylanectans, and this green frog is actually found in regions of Chernobyl and surrounding regions. So the same green frog are black in color in areas where they still have ionization radiations, or they still have radiation pollutions, where the calamity occurred, and those areas which still have radiations, the frogs turn black so as to emit or avoid those radiations. But whereas places which doesn't have any radiation pollution, they are still green in color. So look, so this is just to say that they're also adapting, or they are also evolving, or they are also adapting to changes or problems around them. So another important thing about amphibians is that, like the metamorphosis, we know that they lay eggs hatch out into tadpoles, and they live in the water for some time, before which they metamorphosize into miniature adults. So we all have this concept that, like, the tail get cut off, or it loses its tail while metamorphosize. But it's not the case. What happens is, when they are a tadpole, their sole purpose or their sole job is to feed, and they eat and store all this energy in the tail, and they use up that energy for the transformation, and the tail is actually resorbed into the body when they metamorphosize. So this is all what all of us know. But there are another group of frogs which are called direct developers, who actually bypassed the tadpole stage. What they do is, they just lay eggs, and the eggs hatch out into miniature froglets. I hope you can see those images on the right. So they lay eggs in tree holes, or in leaf litter, or among leaves, or attached to under the leaf and all. And those eggs will directly hatch out into miniature adults, as you can see in this image. Another interesting thing about amphibians is their advertisement calls. Why do they call? Why are they like croaking? Why do they make all this noise during the range? It is to advertise their presence. It is to impress their mates. It is to get a female. It is to impress a female. So there are majorly two types of calls: courtship call and a territorial call. Not terrestrial, sorry. Territorial call. Courtship call is to impress a mate. So here, a male frog, only the male frogs call. Female frogs do call, but like a very less fraction compared to the males. The females respond. It will be more like a response call and all. So mostly the males call, and the males call, like, the calling is an indication of its energy, its strength, and all those things. And it also maintains a territory. It is not a tiger, or it's not just us like building a wall around our home, or like maintaining a territory, or like a tiger maintaining a territory. Even amphibians maintain a territory during the breeding cycle. It might be the best place. It might be the safest place. So whenever these animals are calling, at the same time they are impressing their mates, they are also advertising their positions to the predators. They're also saying, so like for a frog, he'll be saying that, oh, here, I have a good territory. I have a nice territory. I have a nice place to lay eggs. It has a lot of food. I have a nice place to nurture the babies, or I have a nice place to take care of the babies. But at the same time, he's also advertising his presence to the predators, to a snake or a bird, or another reptile, or any other group of animals that prey upon them. So it's very risky. And maintaining the territory, there used to be fights. Literally like wrestling, you can see males fighting each other, throwing one another from a leaf, or another one from a stone and all. Yeah, these are images of some of those fightings. Like the one who lose will move from that area and establish a new territory. So calling vocalization is also a very interesting process. And parental care, there's a variety of parental care that's been shown by amphibians. On the left, you can see frogs carrying eggs like stuck to their dorsal skin. On the right, we already discussed the gastric brooding frog. And there are another species like called as Suriname toads. They carry the eggs on their dorsal skin, and from that skin pouches, young ones hatch out. And there are midwife toads, and there's an arrow poison frog. On the top right is the arrow poison frog. So maybe you can note it down. There is a series called as Life in Cold Blood. There are two parts, amphibians and reptiles in it. If ever you get a chance, like, go watch it. So it has very amazing videos of these parental care, like, demonstrated nicely. So this arrow poison frog, that's another interesting thing you all would have heard of. That's one of the most deadliest animals in the world. You would have heard venomous and have heard the word venomous and poisonous. So venom is something that can kill you when it is injected into your body. But whereas poison is something that can cause a problem when it is injected as well as it is ingested. If you take a spoon of venom and if you have it, if you take it, if you gulp it, you won't die unless you don't have any cuts or bruises inside your mouth or like stomach wall and all. Whereas poison is something, if you ingest it, it can kill you. So snakes are actually venomous. It is produced in a venom gland, and they like pump it into its prey's or predator's body using their fangs. Whereas poison is different. So arrow poison frogs, they're found in Central South American forests. So they feed on specific insects, and from the insects, they sequester a toxin, and that toxin is deposited on their dorsal skin. So there are indigenous people in Central South American forests who use these frogs for gathering poison for their arrows. That's how they got the name arrow poison frogs. So I was mentioning about the documentary Life in Cold Blood. Do watch it. It has very amazing videos on how these animals do parental cares and stuff. So we had been discussing about amphibians all this time, like, why amphibians, or why should we conserve amphibians? What is their ecosystem function? What are they giving to us? So, like, we are living in a human-centric or anthropocentric system where we all discussed about biodiversity and all those things, and all this biodiversity and all this Earth's diversity, the forest, land, ocean, everything is being controlled by the smallest fraction of the biodiversity, which is us humans. And we always tend to look at things on how and like what scale it is helpful to us. How is it helping humans, or how is it helping us? If you look at it that way, how are amphibians important? Like, why are amphibians important? With a simple image, you can clearly define why amphibians are important or why frogs are important. If frogs go extinct from our Earth, this is literally what will happen. For instance, if you look at a mosquito repellent, like, for instance, if you take Goodnight or Mortein, these kind of things, like, I'm specifically talking about like an Indian scenario or Kerala scenario. It's different in many other places, or it's different in temperate region. They come up with new products every year. Why is that? Because the insects gets resistant to it, the existing products. They gets resistant to the existing product. So frogs are nature's insect control agents. They consume up to like around 2,000, 3,000 insects per day. Like some large amphibians, they do that. So you can imagine the amount of insect control. For us, it's a pest control that these animals bring in. And amphibians or frogs, they are excellent bioindicators. To know if an aquatic ecosystem is polluted or not, we can actually look at amphibians. They are found only in unpolluted waters, or they are found only in like non-polluted ecosystems or non-polluted aquatic ecosystems. So they are excellent bioindicators. And of course, like other large charismatic animals, as a person who work on frogs, as a person who advocate for frogs, I would always say that they are also beautiful, like the birds, reptiles, tigers, elephants, and all. These are some of the eyes of some of the frogs and they were all photographed within Kerala itself. This is just some of them. There are a lot more diversity in their eye patterns and all. So yeah, this is a basic thing that we all discussed: the difference between a frog and a toad. Frog have a smooth skin, whereas a toad have a warty skin. Frogs can only live in wet and humid conditions, whereas toads are also found in desert kind of conditions. They can be in like drier areas. Frogs have teeth, toads don't have teeth. The skin we already discussed. Frogs have long legs, whereas toads have shorter legs. And finally, toads, they have a gland behind their ear, a long gland called as parotid gland. And this parotid gland secretes some kind of toxic substance. It's not harmful for humans, but then they use it as an anti-predatory strategy against their predators, probably cats or other snakes and all. So toads have that, but frogs doesn't have it. Coming to Kerala, we have around 200 species of amphibians belonging to 2 orders. A quick question. So, by how much time do we have left?
We can wind up at 10 o'clock your session. Then there will be a short question answer session. Then the Kahoot in 10 minutes.
Okay, so
So,
like I have 10 more minutes or what?
yeah, 10 more minutes. Is that okay, or you want more time?
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
I will quickly move into the Mahabali frog thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So IUCN red lit assessment. I hope you all have heard about it. It's a red listing process where scientists from around the world sit together and we look at amphibians, or like be it any other animals. Like I'm just specifically talking about amphibians. They look at species and we look at threats that these animals are facing, and we categorize them based on the level of threat. So we have different categories. For instance, like we have extinct in the wild, critically endangered, near threatened, vulnerable, least concern, data deficient, or not evaluated. There are several categories, and based upon the threat status, we classify animals. And in that also, amphibians stands on the top with around 41% of assessed animals are threatened with extinction around the world. This had made headlines like recently as well, based on a study that we did during the COVID period, and the results were published last year, which was published in a journal called Nature. Yeah. So coming to another important part of our talk is Mahabali frog, evolutionary distinct and globally endangered species. So Mahabali frog, or the purple frog, the first name is known as. So earlier this was like known as purple frog, and nowadays we call it Mahabali frog for so many different reasons. So this animal is one of the most evolutionary distinct and globally endangered species. So like the IUCN Red List, National Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, IUCN, there is another list called as evolutionary distinct and globally endangered species, EDGE species. And this list is maintained by Zoological Society of London's Edge of Existence program, where they classify animals based on their evolutionary distinctiveness and their endangered status from IUCN. And as per the EDGE list, out of the 1,000 species found in the world, the Nasica batrachus sahiadensis, or the purple frog, was in the 3rd rank initially. You can see the Chinese giant salamander in the 2nd rank. There is this Arceus frog, which is in the 1st rank. So why is it evolutionary distinct? Why is it so important? Why is it so unique? So it's a species that lives underground, that lives under soil, like our legendary king Mahabali. I think all of you know Mahabali, right? I don't think I'll have to explain it, right? Suraj bhai?
Right.
Mahabali.
Yeah, everybody knows. Yes.
Perfect. So this particular frog, they live underground. They live like in burrows underground, and they live underground throughout the year. They come above ground only for a single day in India. And because of that characteristic behavior, we slowly started calling in Mahabali frog towards its conservation and all those stuff. So is that their evolutionary distinctiveness? Coming out only for a day in a year, is that unique? Yes, it is unique, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that their closest relatives are found in the islands of Seychelles, like a small patchy island between Madagascar and India. And amphibians, they have a peculiar feature. They can't tolerate salinity. If you put them in salt water, they'll die. So how is it possible for this particular frog to have a genetic relationship with a frog in Seychelles, some 2,500 kilometers away? Birds fly above the oceans. Some reptiles, they drift on logs and they move across oceans. Some mammals have traveled along with humans in ships and all. But then like amphibians, which can't tolerate salinity, how is it possible that they are genetically related? So this animal, this purple frog or this Mahabali frog, is a living evidence of the Gondwana land hypothesis. So what's Gondwana land hypothesis? So when we discussed about Western Ghats, I've told you, right, Western Ghats is older than Himalayas. So India was actually part of Africa. And from Africa, India slowly separated and it was moving through the ocean. And it was at that point, Madagascar split off. So if you look at the map and if you look at the Madagascar, you can clearly see it fits into the African part like a jigsaw. So as India as well. And India drifted along the ocean and it moved and it came to the Asian continent and hit the Asian continent. And that's when Himalayas originated. So if we go to the top of the Himalayas, there is a place in Spiti Valley in Himachal Pradesh. There's a place in Kibar called Pine Valley National Park. And if you go there, on top of the mountain, you can see fossils of animals from the sea, from the ocean. How is it possible? So that's how it is explained. That like we have clear explanation for this, because Himalayas arose when the Indian main continent hit with the Asian continent. That's when Himalayas arose. And Western Ghats was there even before this collision. And that's how the purple frogs are genetically related to the frogs in the Seychelles. So this frog is a living fossil. It is an it's a living evidence for the Gondwana land hypothesis. It's a living evidence for the fact that it is living evidence or living proof proving that India was part of Africa once. So that is the importance of this particular species. So when I started working on it, like we knew very little about it and we started working on it. And to be honest, most of the people, frogs are considered as like yucky or ugly and all. And a species like this, you can see like, and a species like this, which is like a blobby thing, which is, and some people also call it as turtle without a shell. So for a species like this, which is not very charismatic or which is not very colorful or which is not like really connecting to the common people, and to popularize it, to raise the profile of the species is when we thought about why not use this Mahabali story connection? Why not use its behavior to connect it with the people? So earlier, very few people knew about it. Only the people in the scientific community or like people who really love nature or who read stuff used to know about it. But now the case is different because of this Mahabali campaign as well as the state frog campaign. The frog is very popular. Earlier, like 10 years back or like 5 years back, when I go to a college, when I go to a school, when I go to a indigenous settlement, when I go to a place and try to speak about the species, maybe one or two in hundreds might have heard about the species. But now it is different. Now a large percentage or a greater number of people have heard the name at least. They know that, like, even if they don't know about the evolutionary stuff, about the Gondwana hypothesis, they know that like it's a species that lives underground and comes above ground only for a day in India. So that has really worked. So this is also an example that we use to cite on how to conserve species that are less charismatic, that are not like a tiger, that are not like an elephant, that are not seen, or that are not really beautiful, or that are sometimes for some people ugly. For me, it is not ugly, but yeah, for many of my friends also say that, like, hey, you're working on a bizarre, ugly species. But then, like, for me, it's one of the most beautiful frogs. So the interesting thing about the Mahabali frog is that they live underground. They come above ground only for a day in a year. They lay their eggs and they go underground again. And the tadpoles, they live in water. They live in fast flowing streams. And they are like sucker fishes. Like you can see in that image, they have this suctorial mouth parts, and with which they can hold on to fast flowing waters. And these tadpoles, they can hold on to fast flowing waters at very fast speed, and they live in the water for like 120 days, and they finally metamorphosize into miniature adults and go back. This is like these are some like scientific or academics, like these are the places where they are found. It was thought to be rare, but it's not as rare as we thought it to be. It is found in a larger landscape, but the fact that it lives underground and comes above ground only for a day in a year makes it rare to see. It was endangered earlier, but now it has been classified into near threatened, fairly better state than its earlier state. This is some of the images that on the studies that we have done. So the threats that they face, obviously global warming and climate change. So it takes around 8 days for them to hatch out into tadpoles. So it rains and the rain stops. If it doesn't rain for at least like 5 or 6 days and continuously, the stream will dry up and all the eggs will die. Or if it rains faster, fast waters might like wash them off, like thrash these eggs, and those eggs gets lost. And on the right hand image, you can see a stream, and those are the glass pieces of a liquor bottle that local tourists are thrown in. So tourism and littering is another threat for their habitat, or like causing the pollution or littering in their habitats. Then on the bottom left is obviously roadkill, a purple frog that came, a Mahabali frog that came out above ground for breeding, but that was smashed on the road during the monsoons. And obviously disease, and like these are some activities that we have done, like some just like 1 or 2 images, but we've done around large number of awareness activities, social media campaigns. And these, I hope some of you might also have heard about the state frog campaign. We proposed it to be the state frog. It's yet to be accepted or considered, but then that proposal itself got a lot of momentum or a lot of visibility for the species. The species is well known among the locals in and around their habitats because of all these kind of campaigns. These are some of the posters that we did for campaigns, like for wishing Onam. And on the other side, on the right hand side, is one of the posters that we did during the flood relief time, where we used the purple frog as a mascot to communicate with the local peoples and common man. Some of the articles that we did. So I think like I'll wrap it up here, and maybe we'll continue the discussion on frogs or other stuff on different occasion. And I think I'll open the thing for questions at this point. And like once again, I would like to thank the team, Samanwaya, all the participants, and especially organizers and Suraj Bhai for having me here and kindly listening to me all the time. So yeah, once again, thank you. And like it's open for questions. Suraj Bhai, if you want to add anything, can.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. Now, if anybody is having any questions, like it's not the end of the session actually. Like today, we are winding it up as the time. No, it's actually here. It is 10 o'clock now. That's why, and definitely we
I
need to
just
continue. Yeah.
Sorry. Please finish
No,
it.
no,
Please.
you continue. That's it. Yeah.
I'll just quickly mention like two more slides,
Sure.
and then I'll wrap it up. One sec. Okay, so this is another species, just like the purple frog, and it's called galaxy frog because of the galaxy-like pattern on their body and their beautiful, colorful body. So this is a frog which is also found in Western Ghats and is also distributed. Its largest distribution is in Kerala. It's called galaxy frog, and similar to our Nasica Batrachus or Mahabali frog campaign, we have also done campaigns on this species, like along with my friend and colleague Rajkumar, Dr. Rajkumar, who had been working on it. And this is one frog which is the mascot, or which is a flagship species of one of our protected areas in Kerala, which is Madhigatan Shola National Park. So it's kind of first in India where a frog is becoming a mascot or a flagship species of a protected area, and that is Madhigatan Shola National Park. And Madhigatan Shola National Park, its flagship species is this particular species called as galaxy frog. And there is another protected area in West Bengal called Jore Pokri Wildlife Sanctuary, which has a Himalayan salamander as a mascot. So both Kerala and West Bengal are the two states in India, maybe like the only two states in the world to have a protected area as with a frog flagship species or an amphibian flagship species. So this is another amazing species that is found in the Western Ghats. Maybe we'll discuss more about it in the next talk or so. So yeah, so I just wanted to make this point as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep.